Lieutenant Jack Miller stared at the screen in front of him. His mouth fell open. He checked the numbers again, then ran the scan a second time. The results were the same. "Captain Wright, you need to see this," he called out, his voice shaking a little. Captain Susan Wright moved across the bridge of the exploration vessel. Her steps were quick but steady. She had been mapping stars in this sector for 15 years, but she had never heard that tone in Jack's voice before. "What is it, Lieutenant?" she asked, leaning over his shoulder. Jack pointed at the reading. "Planet 3 in this system. The scan says it's a Class 15 Deathworld." Susan's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Run it again." "I already did. Twice." The captain took over the console herself. Her fingers flew across the controls as she adjusted the settings and ran a more detailed scan. The result came back the same. Class 15. "This can't be right," she muttered. "Nothing sentient evolves on anything above Class 10. The conditions are too extreme." Yet the evidence was right there on the screen. The planet had crushing gravity, nearly 30% stronger than standard habitable worlds. Its atmosphere contained elements that would be toxic to most known species. The temperature swings between regions were extreme. There were active volcanoes, massive storms, and areas of dangerous radiation. But the most shocking thing wasn't the planet itself. It was what they found on it. "Captain, I'm picking up artificial signals," said Communications Officer Kelly Paul. "Billions of them. Radio waves, digital transmissions, artificial light patterns. This planet isn't just inhabited, it has an advanced civilization." Susan moved to the main view screen. "Show me." The screen lit up with images of the blue-green world. As the ship moved into orbit, they could see the night side of the planet glowing with city lights. There were structures visible even from space. Massive buildings, long roads, huge ships crossing the oceans. "How is this possible?" Jack asked. "According to everything we know, nothing should be able to evolve higher intelligence in those conditions." Susan studied the readings. Not just higher intelligence. They have technology, culture, massive population centers. They've adapted to every environment on the planet. Deserts, ice caps, mountains, oceans. The crew worked quickly, gathering more data. Their sensors detected vehicles moving on land, in the sea, and through the air. They picked up thousands of languages being spoken across the planet. They found evidence of art, music, and science. "Have they detected us?" Susan asked. Officer Ben Howard checked his instruments. "I don't think so. Their space monitoring seems focused on their own orbital satellites and nearby space debris. They don't appear to have long-range sensors that could spot our ship yet." Susan made her decision. "We need to report this to Federation headquarters immediately. But first, I want more information. We need to understand how any species could not just survive, but build a civilization on a Class 15 world." She turned to Jack. "Lieutenant Miller, prepare a stealth probe. I want close observation of one of their smaller population centers. Let's see these beings up close." Jack nodded and went to work. 12 minutes later, the small probe detached from the ship and moved silently toward the planet. The probe's first images appeared on the main screen. The crew gasped. The beings looked almost like them. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. They walked upright and used tools. "They're so similar to us," Kelly whispered. "How can they live in those conditions?" The probe zoomed in on a group of the aliens. They were laughing, playing some kind of game that involved running and jumping despite the crushing gravity. A storm was approaching, with lightning flashing in the distance, but they seemed unconcerned. Susan leaned forward, watching the creatures with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. "Whatever they are," she said quietly, "they've done the impossible. They've turned a death world into a home." Dr. Alan Porter checked his equipment one last time. As the Federation's top xenobiologist, he had studied life forms on over 200 planets, but nothing had prepared him for this assignment. "Are you sure this disguise will work?" he asked Nicole Baker, the cultural specialist on his team. Nickel adjusted the artificial skin around his ears. The probe data was very clear. These humans won't notice anything strange as long as we keep our ears covered and don't draw attention to ourselves. Frank Martinez, the security chief, looked uncomfortable in his human clothing. I still think this is too risky. We should observe from orbit. Federation orders are clear, Dr. Porter said. We need to understand how any species could evolve on a Class 15 Deathworld. That means getting close. Their small team had landed their cloaked ship in a forest outside a medium-sized human settlement. According to their data, the place was called Pine Creek and had about 20,000 residents. It seemed like a good place to observe humans without the complications of their largest cities. The three aliens stepped out of the forest and walked toward the town. They had studied human movement carefully and practiced walking in the stronger gravity. It was tiring but manageable for short periods. As they reached the first buildings, Nickel pointed to a structure with a sign. That appears to be a place where humans gather to consume nutrition. We can observe social behaviors there. Inside the diner, they sat at a table near the back. Frank scanned the room with hidden instruments while pretending to look at a menu. "This is incredible," he whispered. "The air in here contains particles that would be toxic on most worlds. These humans are breathing it without any protection." A human server approached their table. "What can I get for you folks today?" she asked with a smile. Nickel had practiced human speech patterns. "We would like coffee, please. We are just passing through town." "3 coffees coming up," the server said. "Let me know if you want to order food." When she walked away, Dr. Porter leaned forward. "Did you notice? She's carrying a small human child inside her body. Their reproduction system allows them to continue normal activities while growing offspring. The physical strain would kill most species." A few minutes later, the server returned with 3 cups of dark liquid. The aliens looked at each other nervously. Their research said this coffee was a common human drink, but the analysis showed it contained chemicals that would be used as industrial cleaning agents on their homeworlds. Frank took a small sip and tried not to show his shock. "They drink this for pleasure," he said quietly. "It contains enough stimulants to cause heart failure in our species." Through the window, they watched as rain began to fall. The water drops contained acids and pollutants, yet humans walked through it without protection. Some children even jumped in puddles, laughing. For the next several days, the team observed humans in different settings. They watched construction workers lifting heavy objects in the crushing gravity. They saw humans consuming foods that contained compounds their scanners identified as capsaicin, a defense chemical so potent it would be classified as a weapon on most worlds. Most surprising was the human relationship with danger. At a local sports field, young humans deliberately crashed into each other at high speeds as part of a game. At night, they gathered to watch entertainment that simulated terrifying situations. "They seek out fear," Nickel said as they reviewed their findings in the ship. "They intentionally expose themselves to situations that trigger stress responses." Dr. Porter nodded. "That explains their entertainment. Their stories almost always involve danger, struggle, and survival against overwhelming odds." Frank pulled up data from his security scans. "Their bodies are just as remarkable. They can lose significant amounts of blood and survive. Their bones repair themselves after breaking. They can go days without water, on a Class 15 Deathworld." Dr. Porter looked out the ship's window at the town below. "We need more time. We've barely scratched the surface of understanding these humans. Whatever shaped their evolution has created something the Federation has never encountered before." The rain turned to lightning and thunder, but in the town, life continued without pause. Humans weren't just surviving on this Deathworld. They were completely at home. After 3 weeks on Earth, Dr. Porter's team had filled dozens of data files with observations. Each discovery about humans left them more amazed than the last. "Look at this," Nicole said, pointing to her screen in their hidden ship. "I've been studying their entertainment networks. These humans have thousands of stories about surviving impossible situations. Dr. Porter looked over her shoulder. The screen showed humans watching something called a movie, where people survived in frozen mountains with little equipment. They call this entertainment, he said. On any other world, this would be a horror story. Frank walked in with new sensor readings. You won't believe what I recorded today. A human female lifted a ground vehicle to free a trapped child. The vehicle weighs over 2,000 kilograms. How is that physically possible? Dr. Porter asked. Their bodies produce something called adrenaline. It gives them brief periods of incredible strength when they perceive danger. Most species freeze when threatened. Humans become stronger. Nickel pulled up more files. Their adaptability is just as impressive. Humans live in deserts where temperatures reach 50 degrees. They also live in regions that freeze for months at a time. Some even live underwater for extended periods. Dr. Porter shook his head in wonder. And they do this with the same basic body type. They don't even hibernate or change form. The team gathered around a table covered with samples they had collected. Food wrappers showed humans regularly consumed substances that would kill most alien species. Medical scans revealed humans could survive losing limbs, having organs removed, or receiving blood from other humans. They are constantly fighting their environment, Frank said, and somehow they're winning. The next day, the team ventured into town again. They wanted to observe a local event called a fair. According to their research, it was a gathering where humans demonstrated cultural practices and skills. At the fair, they saw foods with dangerous levels of sugar and fat. Children rode on spinning machines that generated forces that would cause brain damage in most species. One area had humans throwing sharp objects at targets. Are they training for combat? Frank asked quietly. No, Nickel replied, checking her data. This is called entertainment. They do it for pleasure. They passed a stage where a man was lifting enormous weights. The crowd cheered as his face turned red and his body shook with effort. He's deliberately straining his muscular system to its limits. Dr. Porter whispered. Any other species would avoid such stress. The team stopped at a booth selling a frozen sweet substance. After careful analysis with hidden scanners, they determined it wasn't immediately toxic and purchased some to blend in. This ice cream contains enough calories to fuel an adult of our species for a full day, Dr. Porter noted after taking a small taste. Humans eat it as a small snack. As evening approached, they observed a new phenomenon. Loud sounds began coming from a central area. Humans gathered there, moving their bodies in synchronized patterns. What are they doing? Frank asked. Nicole consulted her cultural database. It's called dancing. They move to rhythmic sounds as a social activity. Despite the extra energy expenditure in this high gravity, the three watched as humans danced for hours without showing significant fatigue. Some even consumed substances that altered their mental state, yet continued to function. Later, back at their ship, Dr. Porter summarized their findings for the official report. Humans don't just survive on this Class 15 Deathworld, he dictated. They thrive here. They have adapted to every challenge the planet presents. Their bodies can withstand physical trauma that would kill most species. They consume substances that would be considered toxic weapons on other worlds. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Most remarkable of all is their attitude toward danger. Where most species evolve to avoid threats, humans seem drawn to them. They intentionally seek out challenges. They create games and activities that simulate danger. Their entire culture celebrates those who take risks and overcome impossible odds. Dr. Porter looked at the night lights of the town below. In short, what makes a Class 15 Deathworld deadly to other species may be exactly what shaped humans into one of the most formidable species we have ever encountered. The fourth day of observation started like the others. Dr. Porter's team left their hidden ship and walked into town. Their disguises had worked well so far. No humans had noticed anything strange about them. We should visit the repair shop area today, Nicole suggested. My research shows humans their work with dangerous machines and chemicals. Frank checked his personal shield. I still don't like being this exposed. Our technology could fail at any moment in this environment. His words proved strangely predictive. As they approached a building with a sign reading Diane's Auto Repair, a red warning light flashed on Frank's wrist device. Power fluctuation in the cloaking field, he whispered urgently. Something in this area is interfering with our systems. Dr. Porter looked worried. We need to return to the ship immediately. But before they could turn around, there was a soft, buzzing sound. The shimmer of their cloaking field became visible for a moment, then disappeared completely. Their ship, hovering silently above the repair shop, was now fully visible to any human who looked up. No, 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 Frank muttered, frantically working his controls. The main cloaking system is offline. A noise made them look up. A human female had stepped out of the repair shop. She was wiping her hands on a cloth and staring directly at their ship. Well, that's something you don't see every day, the woman said calmly. The three aliens froze. This was the worst possible scenario. First contact with a primitive species, completely unplanned and unauthorized. The woman looked from the ship to the three visitors. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I'm guessing you folks are connected to that, she said, pointing upward. Dr. Porter opened his mouth but couldn't think of what to say. Their cover story hadn't prepared them for this. The woman smiled slightly. You might want to move it before someone else notices. My garage has a large back area. No windows. The team exchanged glances. Frank touched his emergency signal button, but nothing happened. Our systems are malfunctioning, he said quietly to Dr. Porter. The woman was still watching them. Name's Diane Russell, by the way. And whatever you've got hovering up there is about to be spotted by old Mr. Peterson, who walks his dog this time every morning. Dr. Porter made a quick decision. Can you help us? Diane nodded. Pull your ship into my back garage. I'll close the doors. Frank managed to reestablish basic control of the ship. He guided it slowly down behind the repair shop as Diane opened a large door. The ship barely fit inside. Once the doors were closed, the three aliens stood nervously facing the human. She didn't seem afraid, just intensely curious. So, she said, either the government has some new toys they're testing, or you folks aren't from around here. And I mean really not from around here. Nicole stepped forward. We are researchers. We mean no harm. Diane laughed. I figured that much. If you were here to take over, you'd probably bring more than 3 people. Frank was trying to restart their systems when a sudden spark made him jump back. Diane moved quickly, grabbing an extinguisher and putting out the small fire that had started. Your power system is overloading, she said, looking at the ship's exposed panel. Something about our local electrical grid must be interfering with it. The aliens were surprised by how quickly she understood their technology. Yes, Frank admitted. Our systems aren't designed to handle the electromagnetic fields on your planet. Diane picked up a tool. I might be able to rig up a buffer. Been fixing machines my whole life. Before they could stop her, she had opened another panel and was examining the ship's power core. Interesting design, she murmured. But you've got your flow regulators configured all wrong for Earth's magnetic field. Within minutes, she had created a makeshift device from parts in her shop. She connected it to their ship. Try it now, she said to Frank. Amazingly, the ship's systems began to restart. The warning lights stopped flashing. Dr. Porter stared at the human in astonishment. She had just repaired advanced alien technology with primitive tools and scrap parts. How did you do that? He asked. Diane shrugged. Just good with machines. Always have been. She wiped her hands again and looked at them with open curiosity. So, want to tell me what brings you to my planet? Diane sat across from the aliens in her small office behind the repair shop. She had closed the garage for the day, putting up a sign that said Family Emergency. Now she listened as Dr. Porter explained their mission. "So you're telling me Earth is classified as a Class 15 death world?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "And that's the worst kind?" "Yes," Dr. Porter replied. "No other known sentient species has evolved in such conditions. It should be impossible." Diane laughed. "Well, we humans have a habit of doing impossible things." She offered them water, which they accepted after scanning it. Even water on Earth contained minerals that were uncommon on their worlds. "Your reaction is unusual," Nicole said. "Most species would panic upon meeting aliens." Diane shrugged. "I've seen weirder things. My brother Greg was in the military. The stories he tells would make your hair stand on end. If you had hair." As if on cue, the back door opened, and a tall man walked in. "Your text said it was urgent." He stopped when he saw the visitors. "Oh, you have company." "Greg, these folks are scientists from space," Diane said calmly. "Their ship broke down. They've been studying humans because apparently we live on a death planet." Greg Russell looked at the aliens for a long moment. Then he pulled up a chair. "Military?" he asked. Frank nodded, recognizing a fellow security officer. "Yes. Protection detail for our scientists." Greg seemed to relax slightly. "Well, your secret's safe with me. Saw enough classified stuff in the service to know when to keep quiet." Over the next few hours, the humans and aliens talked. The researchers asked questions about life on Earth, and the Russell siblings answered. They were surprised by how quickly the humans accepted their presence. "Aren't you afraid of us?" Nicole asked. Greg laughed. "Lady, I've jumped out of planes at 30,000 feet, survived 2 weeks in a desert with just a knife, and once had to stitch my own leg wound with fishing line. 3 peaceful aliens don't even make my top 10 list of scary things." Dr. Porter was fascinated. "You willingly put yourself in those dangerous situations." "It was my job," Greg said. "But yes, some of us seek out challenge. Humans get bored easily." Diane pulled out her phone and showed them videos of human activities. People climbing mountains without ropes, diving to ocean depths, racing vehicles at deadly speeds. "You do these things for fun?" Frank asked, looking horrified. "Some people do," Diane said. "I personally prefer fixing things, but we all push limits in our own way." Dr. Porter made notes as Greg described human history: wars, explorations, survival against plagues and natural disasters. "Your species seems to thrive under pressure," the scientist observed. Greg nodded. "There's an old saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' Pretty much sums up human history." As evening came, Diane suggested the aliens stay in her garage overnight. Their ship needed more repairs, and it wasn't safe to move it yet. "What about your Federation?" she asked. "Won't they be looking for you?" Frank looked worried. "Yes. We missed our check-in. They might send a search party." "Then we better get your communication system working," Diane said practically. "No offense, but I don't think Earth is ready for a bunch of spaceships showing up." She went to work on their systems, asking questions about how things functioned. Her ability to understand alien technology was remarkable. "In your classification system," Greg asked as they watched Diane work, "what makes Earth so deadly compared to other worlds?" Dr. Porter listed the factors: high gravity, extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, toxic plants, radiation, bacteria, viruses, temperature swings. Greg whistled. "When you put it that way, it does sound bad. Yet you not only survived but built an advanced civilization," Nicole said. "It's unprecedented." Diane looked up from her work with a grin. "Maybe that's exactly why we succeeded. We had to be tough, smart, and adaptable just to survive here. It forced us to evolve those traits." Dr. Porter considered this idea. Perhaps the very harshness of Earth had created humanity's greatest strengths. The Federation had always avoided death worlds, seeing them as barriers to life. But what if they were actually forges, creating species with extraordinary capabilities? He watched as Diane, a simple mechanic from a primitive world, repaired technology far beyond her planet's development level. Perhaps the Federation had much to learn from these Deathworld humans after all. Far above Earth, a large Federation enforcement vessel appeared from hyperspace. Its sleek design was very different from the small research ship hidden in Diane's garage. This was a warship. On its bridge, Admiral Patricia Jones studied the blue-green planet on her view screen. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes were hard. "Confirm that this is the planet where Dr. Porter's team went missing," she ordered. Her officer nodded. "Yes, Admiral. Their last signal came from here 3 days ago. No contact since then." The Admiral tapped her fingers on her chair. "Scan the planet. I want to know what we're dealing with." Minutes later, the results appeared on her screen. Her eyes widened slightly. "A Class 15 Deathworld. Are you certain these readings are accurate?" "Yes, Admiral. We've run the scan 3 times. It's Class 15, and it has a native intelligent species with technology. They've even reached their own moon." Admiral Jones stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. She had served in the Federation fleet for 40 years. She had seen many threats come and go. But this was different. "The High Council was right to be concerned," she said quietly. "Any species that evolves on a Class 15 world would have to be incredibly aggressive and resilient to survive. If they ever develop faster than light travel, they could be a serious threat to the entire Federation." Her second-in-command looked worried. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "Prepare the containment protocol. We need to prevent this species from leaving their solar system. Ever." Back on Earth, Diane had finally gotten the aliens' communication system working. Dr. Porter was trying to contact his superiors when a warning alert sounded from their ship's computer. "What's happening?" Greg asked, seeing the aliens' worried faces. Frank checked the screen and looked up in alarm. "A Federation enforcement vessel has entered orbit. It's an Alpha-class warship." "Is that bad?" Diane asked. "Very bad," Nickel replied. "Those ships are only sent when the Federation perceives a serious threat." Dr. Porter's face had gone pale. "They think we've been captured or killed. They're implementing containment protocol." "What does that mean?" Greg asked. "It means they will disable all your planet's communication and defense systems, then establish a permanent blockade. Earth will be quarantined forever." Diane stood up quickly. "They can't do that. Just because we evolved on a tough planet doesn't make us dangerous." Dr. Porter looked at her sadly. "The Federation fears what it doesn't understand, and a species from a Class 15 Deathworld is beyond their understanding." Greg's military training kicked in. "Then we need to make them understand. Fast. Can you contact that ship?" Frank shook his head. "They're not responding to our standard signals." Diane thought for a moment, then snapped her fingers. "What about making the signal stronger? I have an old satellite dish behind the garage. We could modify it to boost your transmission." The aliens looked doubtful, but Greg was already moving. "It's worth a try. What do we have to lose?" Working together, they dragged the rusty satellite dish into the garage. Diane connected it to the ship's communication system using cables and parts from her shop. It was a strange mix of advanced alien technology and basic Earth equipment. "This might work," Frank admitted, watching her work. "But even if we establish contact, what do we say to the Admiral? The Federation has strict containment protocols for potentially dangerous species." Greg thought for a moment. "We need to show them we're not a threat. That living on a Deathworld doesn't make us aggressive. It makes us cooperative. Humans survived because we work together and solve problems." "That's it," Dr. Porter said excitedly. "All our research shows that humans developed strong social bonds and problem-solving skills precisely because your environment was so challenging. You're not dangerous, you're adaptable. And we need to prove it fast," Nicole added, pointing to a reading on their ship. "The warship is powering up its systems. We have maybe 1 hour before they begin the containment procedure." Diane made a final adjustment to their makeshift communication system. A light flashed green. "It's ready," she said. Let's hope it works. Dr. Porter took a deep breath and activated the transmitter. Static filled the air, then cleared. This is Dr. Alan Porter, Federation Science Division, calling the enforcement vessel in Earth orbit. Admiral Jones, please respond. This is an emergency. They waited, the tension growing with each passing second. Then a voice came through the speaker. Dr. Porter, this is Admiral Jones. Explain your situation immediately. Dr. Porter spoke quickly into the communication system. Admiral Jones, we are safe. The humans have not harmed us. In fact, they've helped us repair our ship. There was a pause before the Admiral responded. Dr. Porter, our scans show you're in a human structure. Are you being forced to say this? No, Admiral. We had a technical failure and were discovered by a human. She offered us shelter and assistance. Admiral Jones sounded skeptical. A species from a Class 15 Deathworld helped you willingly. This contradicts all our understanding of evolutionary psychology. Dr. Porter looked at Diane and Greg. That's exactly my point, Admiral. Our understanding is wrong. These humans don't fit our theories. The Admiral's voice hardened. Dr. Porter, you know the protocols. Any species evolving in Class 15 conditions must be contained. The risk is too great. Greg stepped forward. Let me talk to her, he whispered. Dr. Porter nodded and moved aside. Admiral Jones, my name is Greg Russell. I'm a human, and I was a soldier. I understand why you see us as a threat. There was a long silence. Then, you are the native species. How are you communicating in standard language? Their translation devices work well, Greg explained. Admiral, I've spent my life defending my people. If I thought another species threatened us, I would act just as you are. But I ask you to listen before you decide our fate. Something in his direct approach seemed to reach the Admiral. You have 5 minutes. Greg took a deep breath. Yes, Earth is harsh. We have storms that can destroy entire cities. We have tiny life forms too small to see that can kill millions. We have animals that can tear a person apart. But these challenges didn't make us monsters. They made us stronger in a different way. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humans survive because we work together. We protect each other. When disasters strike, we don't fight over resources. We share them. We risk our lives to save strangers. Nicole moved closer to the transmitter. Admiral, our research confirms this. Human cultural development shows increased cooperation in response to environmental threats, not increased aggression. Dr. Porter added, their entertainment consistently portrays self-sacrifice for the greater good as the highest virtue. It's the opposite of what we would expect from a Deathworld species. Diane spoke up. Admiral, when I found these aliens in my garage, my first thought wasn't to capture them or hurt them. It was to help them fix their ship. That's what humans do. We solve problems. And we're curious, Greg continued. We want to learn, to understand the universe. Yes, that drive comes from surviving in a harsh world. But we channel it into exploration and discovery, not conquest. The Admiral didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, her voice came through again. Dr. Porter, I need your complete research findings transmitted to my ship, and I want visual confirmation of your situation. Frank quickly set up a video feed. When it connected, Admiral Jones could see the team standing with the 2 humans in Diane's garage. Dr. Porter transmitted all their research data. Admiral, everything we've learned suggests humans would be valuable allies, not threats. Their problem-solving abilities alone are remarkable. As if to prove his point, Diane was still improving their communication system, boosting the signal strength using parts from old car radios. The Admiral watched her work with technology she couldn't possibly understand. How is she doing that? The Admiral asked. Humans adapt, Dr. Porter explained. Their entire history is about overcoming impossible challenges. That's not a threat to us, it's a gift. The Admiral's face on their small screen showed she was thinking deeply. The containment protocol has never been questioned before. The Federation has always assumed Deathworld species would be too dangerous to contact. Maybe that assumption is wrong, Greg said. Maybe surviving on a Deathworld doesn't make you violent. Maybe it makes you value life more because you understand how precious it is. Admiral Jones studied the humans carefully. I'm suspending the containment protocol temporarily. But the Federation Council will need to make the final decision. This goes against centuries of policy. Dr. Porter nodded. Thank you, Admiral. That's all we ask, a chance to present our findings. I'm sending a shuttle to your location, Admiral Jones said. Dr. Porter's team and the 2 humans will come aboard my ship. The Council has agreed to an emergency hearing. As the transmission ended, Greg looked at his sister. Well, looks like we're going to space. Diane grinned. And here I thought fixing Mrs. Brown's old truck would be the highlight of my day. 6 months later, a Federation diplomatic ship entered Earth's orbit. Unlike Admiral Jones' warship, this vessel was designed for peaceful meetings between worlds. On board were representatives from 27 Federation species, all gathered to witness a historic moment. Dr. Lisa Patel straightened her new Federation uniform and looked out the view screen at her home planet below. As Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Federation, she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Are you ready? Diane Russell asked, joining her at the window. After the events at her garage, Diane had been chosen as part of the small human delegation because of her technical skills and practical problem-solving abilities. As ready as I'll ever be, Dr. Patel replied. The Council is waiting. Greg Russell, now serving as Earth's military liaison, joined them. Remember the plan. We don't deny that Earth is dangerous. We show how that danger shaped us in positive ways. The 3 humans walked into the Grand Council chamber. Representatives from across the galaxy watched them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. At the center sat the Federation's 7 high counselors, including Admiral Jones, who had supported their case after her initial doubts. The lead counselor, a tall being with shimmering blue skin, spoke first. This hearing will determine whether Earth will be granted Federation membership or remain under the containment protocol. Ambassador Patel, you may present your case. Dr. Patel stepped forward. Thank you, counselors. 6 months ago, your scientists discovered that Earth is a Class 15 death world. Your first reaction was fear, and I understand why. But today I will show you why humans don't just survive on our planet. We thrive there. And why that makes us valuable allies. She activated a holographic display showing images of Earth's most extreme environments. Burning deserts, frozen mountains, deep oceans, dense jungles. These are the places humans call home, she explained. We've adapted to every environment on our planet, not through physical evolution, but through intelligence, cooperation, and determination. The council members murmured among themselves as Dr. Patel continued. The Federation fears that a species from a death world would be aggressive and dangerous. But our history shows the opposite. When faced with threats, humans band together. We form communities. We help strangers. We risk our lives to save others. Greg stepped forward next, showing images of human emergency workers rushing into burning buildings, doctors fighting diseases, and communities rebuilding after disasters. As a soldier, I was trained to protect, he said. Yes, humans can fight when necessary, but most of us spend our lives building, healing, and creating. Diane's presentation focused on human innovation. She showed how humans had developed tools and technology specifically to overcome their planet's challenges. We don't just accept our world's limitations, she explained. We find ways around them. When something is impossible, we keep trying until we make it possible. The council deliberated for hours after the presentations. The humans waited nervously outside the chamber. Finally, they were called back in. The lead counselor stood. The council has reached a decision. For centuries, the Federation has avoided death worlds, seeing them only as barriers to life. But your species has shown us that harsh conditions can forge remarkable strengths. A holographic display showed a new image, Earth, with a special designation beside it. Earth will be granted Provisional Federation membership, the counselor announced, but not as a contained world. Instead, you will have a special status as pioneer species. What does that mean? Dr. Patil asked. Admiral Jones stepped forward. It means that humans will serve as the Federation's explorers for worlds too dangerous for other species. Your natural adaptability to extreme conditions makes you uniquely qualified to visit Class 10 and above planets that we've never been able to explore. Diane grinned. So we get to be the ones who go where no one has gone before. Exactly, the Admiral replied. Your people will lead our most challenging missions. In return, you'll receive Federation technology and protection. Greg nodded, understanding the wisdom of this arrangement. So our greatest strength, surviving on a Deathworld, becomes our greatest contribution to the galaxy. As they left the council chamber, Dr. Patil looked once more at the image of Earth on the display. The label beside it now read, Class 15 Deathworld, home of the Federation Pioneer Corps. 6 months ago, they wanted to lock us away forever, she said quietly. Now we're their pathfinders to the unknown. Diane smiled. That's just human nature. We take the impossible and turn it into opportunity.